the reality of where they're at, it's very clear. It's very black and white. They're 1-3. But, I think the best part about being 1-3 is you have the opportunity to become 2-3. And that's where you have to start. It's one opportunity that's next one. And that's the only mindset I think to have.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Welcome to the Booth Review. I'm your host, Brandon McAnderson. We have a very special show for you today with a very special guest. How would you like to earn an extra $500? Go to BlueWirePods.com/survey and complete the Blue Wire audience survey about you and your podcast listening habits for a chance to win a $500 gift card. This survey will help create a better advertising experience for the audience and in turn help this show. That's BlueWirePods.com/survey, where all you have to do is answer some simple questions for a chance to win $500. Make sure to read the full terms and disclaimer, plus complete the survey for a chance to win. BlueWirePods.com/survey. The link will also be in the show notes of this episode. Last week, the Jayhawks traveled to Morgantown and had a 28-17 lead with about 5 minutes left, courtesy of a Luke Grimm rushing touchdown. It was good vibes everywhere. Everything felt good, and then suddenly it didn't. West Virginia, up to that point in the second half, only had 82 yards of offense. 52 of those yards came on one play. So they were not humming by any means. They were only able to get one field goal, 2 punts, and an interception. But suddenly, everything was working. They came alive, and the 2024 Jayhawk script played out the way it had the previous 2 weeks of the season. Some of the poor late-game execution that's kind of marred this defense started to rear its head, and there were several, oh no, hold your head moments, one after another. The Mountaineers chipped away at that lead in short order, and they were able to take a 32-28 lead. Kansas made a hard push, but once again, the game ended on a walk-off strip sack, the same way it did against Illinois. Just the feelings of shock and disappointment running through the program at that moment. Guys just really putting their hearts out there. I know the fan base felt it, seeing the messages and how people felt about this team leading into the season and where they are now. For myself, I think my reaction was a little bit more numb. I think there was a lot of familiarity for me, and the familiarity comes from my junior year of 2006. I'm going to give you this rundown with the hopes that no tears start running down my face, just because, this was some of these losses, looking at some of the faces on the guys interviewing them post-game, I could relate. I had been through it myself. I'll start at the beginning of the season. We played Louisiana Monroe, not a good Sun Belt team at the time. They ended the season 4-8. They were starting a quarterback that had 0 career starts coming into the game. Their quarterback from game 1 got hurt. He came out and threw for 370 yards in Memorial Stadium, David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium. And we had to escape with a 21-19 victory on an onside kick recovery. So pretty rough open to the season to a not good Sun Belt team. A couple weeks later, we traveled to Toledo on a Friday night. Controlled the game for the most part, doubled them up in total yards, similar to what we've seen in like a UNLV matchup. Toledo starting quarterback was 15 of 47. Very similar to what we saw with Sluka and how he attacked us with almost no passing, almost all through the run. We ended up losing that game 37-31 in overtime. A couple weeks later, we go to Nebraska. We're playing Lincoln. That team ended up winning the Big 12 North that year. We had them on the ropes, thought we should have won the game, lost in overtime, 39-32. Texas A&M at home, 2006, up 18-7. 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. We thought we had a really good chance, lose the game 21-18, had a late turnover in our own red zone. But our meltdown masterpiece, our Mona Lisa, was against Baylor. We had the lead 35-17. John Cornish almost had 200 yards rushing. This was not your Robert Griffin Baylor. This was your gold helmet schedule Baylor for homecoming Baylor. This was not a team. We were up 35-17 missed a field goal late, squandered some open opportunities, and lost that game 36-35. I can vividly remember trying to get to the locker room and just feeling, just feeling overwhelmed by how poorly that had went, how let down I had felt about our dreams for that season and our plans. But, as a team, you just can't give up. You got to keep pressing forward. And that losing taught us lessons. They taught us lessons that helped us play at a championship level later on in our careers. A lot of those things were brought about, because that's when change comes, when you make mistakes. And that was the catalyst that propelled us forward into the Orange Bowl season. And that was the next season. Unfortunately for these guys, there's 30 seniors. This is a heavy senior team, and there is no next year. So what are the lessons that they can learn? What are the luxuries that they have for this season? Is that next week is another opportunity to get back on track. This defense is tough. They are 10th in completions against. That means people just don't complete a lot of passes against Kansas. They play sticky coverage. They make it really hard for you they take away easy throws. The back end of that is we are 126th in yards per completion, meaning that we give up a lot of yards when we do give up completions. So the way that we're playing in the front seven with the talent that we have in the secondary, this is very fixable. It's not one begets the other. It's just a matter of discipline, keeping their hands off when the ball's in the air and making plays. And I am very confident, especially after last week, both corners getting interceptions. There is no weak spot to attack. I thought Melo had, he would tell you that it was not a good game for him. In fairness to him, there was a lot of contact at the top of those routes, and man, that was not being called. A lot of Rob Gronkowski type stuff, just headbutts and pushes at the top of the route that made it hard for him. If you saw him, he stumbled out of a lot of breaks, and that was why. Would have been nice to see one of those called, but he doesn't need excuses, and I'm not making them for him, but I did want to be clear about that. I believe in these DBs and the turnovers they were able to create, and that will continue forward. This rushing defense has been excellent. They're 59th in the country, and you say, that's not really a good number, but if you take a deeper look and you really get inside the numbers, you'll find that the Kansas defense is only surrendered 1 run of 12-plus yards all season. 12-plus yards is a explosive run per a lot of categories. Sometimes it's 15, but mostly 12. They've given up 1, and it was a 27-yarder in the last game that was aided by a block in the back that was right in front of the official. Not making an excuse for it, but that did happen. On handoffs to running backs in the last 3 games, they are averaging 2.6 yards per carry, which means this defense is disciplined. They're flying to the ball, and they're not missing tackles. They're able to really control the run game. So what's the downside of it? They played a couple talented, athletic quarterbacks that have pushed that number to a higher number. They have accounted for 64% of the rushing yards given up. And that's just quarterbacks in the last 2 games, via scramble, via planned quarterback run. These guys have been effective in doing that. That's a clear opportunity for this Kansas defense to improve on their pass rushing lanes, to keep guys inside of the pocket. And then when you do keep guys inside of the pocket, not giving them that access to run out and make plays, whether with their feet or with their arms. In the last 2 weeks, that has been a bugaboo. But as we head into TCU week, you're going to be basically facing the best quarterback and set of outside receivers that you face. The good news is he's not a runner. He's not a guy that's going to make plays with his feet. So I like the chances for this offense to be able to this defense to be able to control that TCU run game. And from what I've just laid out in the details there, just that low yard per carry on running back handoffs, that gives me a really good feeling about Kansas being able to defend that Horned Frog run, especially with that quarterback not being as likely to be a guy to take off and make things with his feet. Offensively, I mean, I know I mentioned in the open, but it felt like good times were rolling again, right? Daniel Highshaw's crashing through people, cutting, making plays in the passing game, getting blocks. JD scrambling, making plays downfield, making runs on turns a broken play into a 20-yard gain. His sense of joy and fire was back. The complimentary Luke Grimm run was there. I thought he got his chemistry back with Quentin Skinner. I thought Quentin had a tough start to the season. I thought he was finding himself. Man, it just all felt good. Felt like all the things that we thought about this offense being able to complement Devin Neal is all there. My message to these players is keep working, lock in on the details, and finish. You have an opportunity to rewrite this history in a short period of time. I believe in you and your ability to do so. To the fans, your frustration and disappointment is valid. I hear you. I see the comments. It is your right and freedom to speak out passionately about the things you don't agree with and to speak out passionately about what you want to see change. But there is an element of act like you've been here before. I just explained how we were here in 2006 due to some of the actions of my teams and our meltdown masterpiece. I didn't even get into 2004, where we blew games to Texas and Texas Tech at home. Questionable calls excluded, but really a struggle in games that we really should have won. I remember specifically that Texas Tech game, giving up a 3rd and 13 on a running back draw to the house, ended up putting us away. So there were definitely instances of teams, very good teams, being competitive, fighting for the name on the jersey, and still not being able to reach that goal. But somehow we all survived. We all survived long enough to see our team win an Orange Bowl, to see our team win an Insight Bowl game. But what we often overlook is that in 2006, a season marred by late game collapses, a season where, it was hard to imagine what we would become, but we needed to go through that to get to where we needed to be. I believe that this Jayhawk team is ready to respond to the challenges that they've already faced in 3 consecutive weeks, and only time will tell what this iteration of Jayhawks will learn from this most recent failure. I'm confident that they will get off the snide. They are in Arrowhead this weekend, and if you are in Arrowhead, come out with your home field apparel, all the comfortable, officially licensed, vintage college stuff you could ever want. They've got the Orange Bowl stuff. They've got nostalgia hammered out. They really know how to do it. Just so much striping and, different versions of the Jayhawks, alternate logos, all these different things that you can get to represent your team and to show your love for your team. Just a place that you want to be, especially for game day, especially at Arrowhead, the tailgate capital of the world. Come out in your home field apparel gear. Go to homefieldapparel.com, homefieldapparel.com, and use promo code PAYHEED24.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Welcome back to the Booth Review. I am now joined by the great one of my favorite teammates of all time, probably one of your favorite Jayhawks of all time. I know as a fan, as a lifelong fan from Kansas, from Lawrence, my favorite Jayhawk memory is that Kerry Meier touchdown in the end zone against Missouri in the snow the year after I had finished my career. Just a beautiful moment to experience on TV. And I'm like, hey, I know that guy. Kerry Meier, welcome to the show, my friend.
BMac, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me on. It's been a little bit, but obviously I'm looking forward to connecting and catching up a little bit and talking some X's and O's.
Yeah, man. What you been up to, man? Tell us about what you got going on. I know you're a world traveler. You like to dibble and dabble. You know a lot about oysters. Like you're rich in spirit and understanding. Just tell us what you got going on, man.
Yeah, well, obviously, I am one to kind of traverse and trek the world just to see what's all out there. I think it's that's something that I grew up doing with my parents. We traveled them out, and they exposed us to a lot of different cultures and different ethnicities and people, and obviously that kind of fell right back into my life as I grew up, and obviously as I finished up playing football, I was allowed the kind of the flexibility and freedom to travel a little bit more. So dabbled in experience and living over in South Korea and teaching English over there for a little while, and obviously had a good time doing that, but that reality kind of starts to set in place, and you got to kind of pivot and kind of get back to the grindstone as far as professional endeavors. So came back to the States and got into a master's degree in nutrition and exercise science. And then from there kind of explored the space of sports nutrition. And then during the pandemic, I actually kind of transitioned into a healthcare position. So now I'm working kind of frontline as a clinician, and have kind of been, in that basis of, working with the elderly and kind of taking care of, sick individuals, so to say, nutrition. So I've been in that role for a couple of years, and like I said, I jumped in during the pandemic because I knew there was going to be some fascinating research that was going to come out. Right. So kind of being on the forefront and being in the nutrition sector of that wanted to see how that kind of unfolded. I've been in that space for a couple of years now, like I said, and got to that point now where I'm, exploring the opportunity to kind of expand my practice and get into private practice and start, consulting and working with individuals on a private basis. So looking to kind of get into working private practice, working with high performing individuals or high performance individuals and their nutrition space or whatever their career is, and trying to push that envelope, via nutrition and longevity in that space. So that's where I'm at right now.
Absolutely, man. I want to see you work with these athletes. Former 5th round pick of the Atlanta Falcons. You know what premium athletes, premium bodies, what it takes to fuel them. So I'm excited to follow that journey. So let's talk about what's fueling these athletes right now. I talked in the open about 2006 and some of the similarities. I mean, you and I were at the center of a lot of a team that felt very similar to this one. Confident in the talent at all 3 levels. Having bouts of real success and finding real identity, and then having these random pieces of the team fall apart at different times with no explainable reason. Just describe your experience as, first year starter for you. So I know there was a ton going on. Just talk about your experience and what similarities you see or don't see and your outlook on the team so far this season.
Yeah. So, put myself back into that season. Obviously, I was a redshirt freshman at that point, but, I do see a lot of similarities, throughout both. So, back in 06, we were, just coming off of a postseason bowl game. We played in Dallas, the Fort Worth Bowl, and it was a victory. So naturally expectations were high. Just like last season, they're coming off of a bowl win. So it's very similar in that sense. So, there's, like I said, a lot of expectations that are high within the locker room, surrounding the team, the coaching staff, but also, you mentioned just a little bit earlier, the fan base, the expectations are completely, elevated to another standard, where it's been. So I look at that part, I look at the roster and how that is kind of composed and made up. I look at the quarterback position, JD, he's obviously a different cat. Obviously, he's a lot more electric. In his style of play than I was. I had a little bit of wiggle, but, I think of a schematic standpoint, we started incorporating a lot of zone reads. We started putting a lot more wrinkles and folds as far as kind of run pass option kind of, schemes. But, there, look at the backfield, continue the backfield. We had 2 stud running backs in John Cornish and Mr. BMac himself. And then obviously it's very similar to Devin and Daniel. And then, I think like defensively, we look at the corner position. We had a key locked down, All-American corner. We've got Kobe. And then obviously we have Mello as well. A couple different linebackers are in there as well. We had a couple bosses in Mike Rivera, Joe Mortensen, Jimmy Holt. And then obviously there's a couple, bruises in there now. But, I think of that makeup. I think of coming off that bowl game. I think of our schedule and what we went through. So, as far as the schedule, we were in a lot of tough and tight ball games throughout the year. Yeah. We lost, I think back, early in the season, we were on the road at Toledo. Yeah. Played a tough game at Toledo, which was we took in defeat, but it was a huge kind of learning, game for me early in my career. I learned kind of just the realities of football, right?
Right.
I learned about, it's all right to fail, kind of in public in front of millions and millions of people. It's all right. When I got back to the locker room, I was distraught. We were upset, but, I didn't take it, anything from my teammates. They were right there as they were throughout the offseason. They knew they had confidence in me. But I learned, being able to fail in public, it's okay. And also to never, ever throw late in the flat.
Yeah, those are the lessons. Your quarterback lessons are much more unforgivable than running back lessons. So mine are more like, hey, lower your pads or get killed. Yours are like, hey, everyone's mad at you because you threw the ball late. That transition is much different than what I went through as a player. But I'm glad you brought up Toledo. I think that there was something foundational about that experience for all of us in that, everything about the game said we were better except the scoreboard. Like to be in a game where you're better, but, everything's working the same way. So when you get done with that game, everyone will analyze you as if you are a failure. And I think that's another similarity to what we're seeing now is that they will look at that and say, oh, I don't know if he's got it based on a game where we had 2 times as many yards as they had. We
Yep.
just didn't handle the football well. We didn't handle big moments well, and it led to a loss. And I think that that's where some of that is. When I look at some of the descriptions of what's happening, it gets to me because this team is exactly what we thought they would be. They're very good. They've played 4 games. There's been many tools to evaluate that they would be the better team, except the scoreboard. So, I mean, it's hard, but at times you have to be, your criticism has to match what you're seeing. Your frustration is completely true, but your criticism has to match what you're seeing. And one thing that I appreciated about our team and program that I think this team and program's facing right now is what adversity does to you when you're backed up against the wall. When you're backed up against the wall, everybody's backed up against the wall. So who are you facing? You're facing your teammates, you're facing your brothers. So just talk about, some of your experiences and what you learned about yourself, what we learned as a team that propelled us forward into that next year. And then give me some ways you think in a short amount of time they can flip this thing with so many veteran players.
Yeah. Like you were saying, we were like these parallels between the team. We were so close to being 4-0. The reality was we weren't. And, just like this team, they're very close to being 4-0, but the reality is they're 1-3. So, when you're in those positions and when you're in those games and you're in that many tight games and you're so close to winning football games, there's not a dramatic overhaul that kind of needs to take place. There's just, there's tweaks, there's adjustments that you find in film that you correct, you learn from it, and you move forward. They're breaking the film down and finding those little entities throughout, and it seems like they're popping up, late in the ball games now, but they're allowing themselves to find those mistakes, to take it to the practice field and to make those adjustments.
Yeah, so you've been on both sides as a quarterback and a receiver. And we saw some moments in the West Virginia game where, there was a corner route to Luke Grimm that he turned over the wrong shoulder, probably would have been a touchdown. There was the play a couple plays later on a crossing route to LJ where he saw zone and stopped, but he could have kept going because the defender was occupied. So it's just one of those things where it's really about QB and wide receiver continuity. I know that there were comments that Grimes made about continuity that weren't taken well, but being inside a program, I get it. He's talking about how that the lack of practice collectively between the 3 of them has led to continuity errors. So just are issues that they are going to work out. So just talk about what your perspective is on having to learn both sides of that coin, both as a part-time quarterback, part-time receiver, and as a full-time receiver and part-time quarterback. Just talk about that experience.
Yeah. My experience, obviously having, the bulk of my foundation being built out as a quarterback, understanding the entire scheme, not just as a quarterback, but, the moving pieces that are having, amongst the other 10 players on offense, all the while understanding completely what's going on with the defensive scheme. I always, I'm still enamored by, defenses and how this all happens and how quickly it happens. And there's all these pre-snap adjustments and pre-snap reads. And then as soon as that ball snap, it changes completely. And then you're adjusting, trying to figure out what's going on. So, having that basic understanding and carrying that knowledge from a quarterback over to wide receiver, it obviously allowed for that transition to be a lot more smooth. The biggest learning concept and learning curve for me was just being able to cut loose and play as a wide receiver. I think my mentality as a quarterback, it was kind of double-edged because, the reason I love football was because of the physicality of the game. So obviously as a quarterback, when you're seeking out contact, that's probably not what you want to do. What's going on in high school football is quite a bit different than college. Those contact, running into those linebackers, even the cornerbacks at that level.
I remember you getting yelled at for that.
So the part that I loved about transitioning to wide receiver, it was like I could play as fast as I want. And it went from being hunted to being the hunter. And I was more in like this reptilian mode where I could just go out, attack, so I could play on fire. That's the part that I loved about playing wide receiver. As far as, what's going on with, what's happened previously in this previous game with JD and the wide receiving corps, like those minor mistakes, those are, they're, like I said, they're just minor. They're 100% correctable, with preparation, understanding the situation, the scenario. So, how well that, and I always found out is like how well you play on Saturday or this, it's in a kind of evolving game. I feel like there's there's games every day of the week, but, however well you prepare for, how well you play on Saturday is how well you prepare during the week. And there's a direct reflection of how that works. I know, in these instances, with Luke and with LJ, I know the coaching staff has picked these few things apart on film. I know they've probably taken them to the field and they rep those throughout the week to correct them, so that they don't make those same mistakes again. That's the only way you progress and move forward, is you learn from your mistakes. So, I know JD and the wide receivers, they'll get on the same page. I'm not concerned with that. They've got a ton of experience playing together. It's just the fact of, locking in, to those assignments, knowing your coverages, and then, obviously trying to execute flawlessly.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about your comment about playing with your hair on fire, like playing with that rhythm. And I do think that Kansas got as close as they've gotten this season to finding that rhythm. I thought that there was that sequence to start the fourth quarter. It's hard to look back on it now as a success, right? Because the result was not what they wanted. But they came out into that fourth quarter after the rain delay in a tough situation, punting, earned a 3-and-out, got the football back, almost strictly on the ground, pounding away, ending with the Luke Grimm reverse touchdown, up 28-17. I mean, at that point, those guys were feeling really good about themselves offensively. Unfortunately, they didn't get back on the field till the game was basically out of hand. They had the 3-and-out with the run plays. They weren't able to get the first down. It just feels like one of those seasons where offensively they seem like they're finding that rhythm. Not just, and I say rhythm, I mean like pace of play, right? Like motion, the way people are motioning, running, the way people are running, blocking, what they're seeing. I thought it was close, and a lot of it was, unfortunately, the offensive line had a rough game, and it wasn't a matter of guys just getting beat. It was guys missing assignments, right? So it's like you mentioned before, these guys are missing assignments. These are fixable things. There's nothing that has happened across these 3 losses that's not repairable. And I think that's what you're seeing overall. It's why I am so confident in what they're doing, because I'm so confident in their staff. I know this is more of a college football experience, being in it and understanding it, and then also being a big nerd about it. You start to understand that. I'm excited to see how Coach Leipold is going to respond. I'm excited to see how Coach C and Coach Grimes are going to respond. What Coach Borland's thinking about, okay, how do we rush better? How do we keep our passing lanes? All these different things. These guys have formulated every solution you've thought of as a person and multiply that by another 1,000. These guys are putting in the work. So I'm excited to see in which ways it might manifest on Saturday at TCU. Just from your perspective, in terms of, correcting errors throughout a season where you really can't get over that hump, what are some things you're looking to see early on in that TCU game to show you some signs that maybe that swagger and rhythm and that understanding and self-confidence as a collective self-confidence is back?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the reality of where they're at, it's very clear. It's very black and white. They're 1-3. But, I think the best part about being 1-3 is you have the opportunity to become 2-3. And that's where you have to start. It's one opportunity that's next one. And that's the only mindset I think to have. I think at this matchup with the TCU, I think, both teams are in a very similar kind of position where they're coming off of a tough loss. I think about TCU offensively, pretty potent. Yeah, I think their quarterback, wide receiver, I think both those guys respectively, they're in the top, passing yards and receiving yards in the nation, top 5. So, I think defensively, I was, kind of tuned in these past few games, watching them. I think their run defense, obviously it's been exposed a little bit this season. So, I think about, the things that KU does well. Obviously they run the ball very, very well. So that kind of bodes well for Devin, Daniel, JD and the rest of the crew. But like you said, there's a couple of mistakes that happened last week, just assignment sound, everything, as you are aware, everything usually starts up front, the line of scrimmage, controlling the line of scrimmage. So, I think about this game, what I think is important is them getting off to a fast start. But, as fast a start you can play and have, and as successful it is, watching the game last weekend, it became crucial and paramount late in the game, just execution late in the game to finish the game. So as fast as we start and as successful we are in the beginning, it's all about finishing a ball game. So, they haven't played their best football yet. when it's most important. But, what I'm really looking forward to see is obviously establishing the run game and then just playing a complete 4 quarters of full football to the end, and then just start gaining some of that momentum as they carry into week 6 and the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that, like you mentioned, fast start is super important. But beyond that, scoring in the first quarter helps. It helps a lot. And, they had the early touchdown against UNLV, but they've not had 2 scores in the first quarter yet. They did not score at all against Illinois in the first quarter, and they did not score at all against West Virginia in the first quarter.
Yep.
So there is a need to get out to a fast start because the way that can change the game. I mean, if you look at SMU's last contest, it's SMU had to win the game 4 different times. And it was mostly because of mistakes that TCU was making. TCU came out, fumble, returned for a touchdown, punt, return for a touchdown. They're down 17-0. They answered. They got it to 17-14. They got it to 24-24. Then they raced off on them again, a kick return. And so, SMU played a really strong game. That's a rivalry game. They're going to be action-packed with SMU and TCU. They're always going to go at it like that. But I think what you saw in TCU, and like you mentioned, this will be the best quarterback wide receiver combo that Kansas has faced. I mean, there's no question about that. Savion Williams is phenomenal. I honestly can't wait to see him in person. 6'5", 200 pounds. And honestly, as a radio guy, it doesn't get any better than seeing first-round picks matched up against first-round picks, because whichever side he's going to go against, he's going to be going up against a guy that wants to be a guy that plays on Sunday, and Kobe and Melo, and they want that challenge. I mean, I know for our years, anytime, Aqib had a matchup, we heard about it all week. He talked about it all the time, because we wanted to see it too. So I am excited to see Kobe and these guys, get after one of the better receivers in the country. And, I think that as a whole, this run game that TCU has is something that Kansas can control. They don't have to worry as much about quarterback scramble, quarterback run. So I am pretty pleased about the way that they match up in that way. So I'm looking forward to some of those matchups, definitely on the outside. And then when you flip the field, SMU ran the ball all over TCU. I mean, all over them. And they did it with speed. They did it with different types of running concepts. I feel like SMU's quarterback, Kelly Jennings, is very similar to JD, not just in style of play, but stature. 6 foot, 185, 195 pounds, quick, gets the ball out with zip on the perimeter. I've said this many times. I think JD has been one of my favorite players to watch, especially when he's tapped into that joy, right? Tapped into that joy, that zone that he can find. And what felt like it was there for the first time was that. It was him escaping out of the backfield, throwing a comeback route. It was him getting 20 yards on that broken play. I know how you think and how you feel your way through your life. Just describe what you see when you see JD kind of tap into that joy and kind of permeates through the rest of the team.
Yeah. So, I've only had a couple instances to see JD play in person. Watching from afar, he's such a joy to watch because he plays with extreme passion and emotion. And when you think about the sport of football or any sport, those ones that are extremely passionate are usually pretty successful in their field of play. They care a lot, they invest a lot. But thus far, obviously JD is going to receive a lot of scrutiny. He's had a few turnovers. He's not playing to what the previous taste that the fan base had. But you have to remember, this guy is basically coming off a year from being away from football to injury. But, people expect that electric JD because that was the last taste that they had of him. And frankly, it's been the last time that, the fan base has seen electric at the QB position has been well over a decade. I played alongside Todd, who, he's shattered and set all the records at KU, and is still standing. But, they finally found that taste again at the QB position, which is such an important element. But just need to let the guy play. He will find himself. He will get back into his group, and he will play again. As much as everyone wants him to succeed and put the team on his shoulders, there's nobody that wants to play better and perform better than JD himself. So again, just like I'd mentioned earlier about a few of those mistakes that happened in the previous ball game with the wide receivers, not worried about it. JD will be fine. He'll bounce back. He's ready to play. He's getting back into Arrowhead. He'll get to play there. So, being able to play in front of a home crowd home ground to kind of get back in the flow would be just the right recipe right now.
Yeah, man, that rhythm. And it's one of those things, it's like you mentioned earlier, it's like we talked about, your mistakes at quarterback are much different than my mistakes at fullback. Like it's my mistake will only be seen on the film room. Your mistake is seen by everyone. So they're like, hey, that guy sucks, and I might suck just as bad, but nobody can see it. And I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because I just happened to be watching one of those ACC documentaries or whatever on ESPN, and it was Charlie Ward. And it was the year before they won the national championship. That guy had 8 interceptions in his first 4 games, right? They were calling for his head. They were saying, that can't be. We got to play someone else. And what did he do? He picked himself up. He figured it out. They won 12 games that year. They went 12-2 that year. They came back and won the national championship the year after. So, JD, we believe in you. You're not the first quarterback to make mistakes, and you know that, and I know he plays with such confidence that this won't be an issue. Just know that these guys are behind you, all your Jayhawk family, especially your Jayhawk football brothers. One question I got to ask, too, is that one thing that's been super cool for me is as these receivers, this receiving core has been together for 3-4 years. They've played a lot of football. They're starting to come up in the stats and the rankings. So you're starting to see Kerry Meier a little bit more. You're starting to see these names, getting close to you and starting to surpass you. Describe what that feels like, what your experience has been like from afar, seeing some of these guys approach some of the records you set.
Yeah, I haven't checked on it recently, and I'm surprised they're still standing there. But, when you have a long lull, as far as, the football program, that record's going to stick there for a while. But I know Luke is getting close, but, that's what records are not set to look at and, underachieve. They're there for people to go after and break, right?
Yeah.
It's fuel to achieve, because that's what we're always trying to do. Any phase of life, especially in sports, we're always trying to get better, and we're trying to push that envelope ahead to stretch to see what's possible. So, me personally, that was never my, initial aspirations was to go and set records as a wide receiver at KU. I was trying to, make some movement and change, make some, waves at the quarterback position, but that's how it unfolded, but, when I left that position, I took a lot of pride and I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish, in just those few years of playing, but, I think about that kind of experience, it was me of a combination of me kind of sticking to, my abilities of just, busting my ass and, working off, as much as I could at this new challenge of transitioning from, quarterback to wide receiver, along with obviously getting felted and, playing alongside a really good quarterback in Todd, within a very complex and offensive scheme that was set up by a really good coach, and Coach Warner. So, it wasn't, just me that necessarily set those records. It was a complex entity that, there's different moving parts that led to it. I think when I watched Luke play, he's extremely crafty, smooth kid that does a lot of things well, especially catch the ball. I think the wide receiver position, catch the ball. That's what made me successful, was like if the ball was in radius of me, it was my job to snatch that ball. So that's a large part of his success, he catch the ball extremely well. So, just like I had success, he's had a tremendous amount of success with the help of around him. But, I hope he goes after. I hope he breaks it sooner than later. That's why, like I said, that's what they're all about, is for kids to push forward and go after and achieve and accomplish something that they didn't think they're capable of. So more power to him. I'm ready for him to see him do it.
Yes. So mine is more personal. Devin is always updating me. I remember last year at Cincinnati, he would have passed me on single season touchdowns, but he had to come out. And after halftime, he said, "I'm coming for you, BMac." And I just really enjoyed that, man. I want to see all these records breaking. I want to see another Orange Bowl. I want to see a more than 12-win team. It's just so much fun to see. To me, that's the true paying forward. I'll never be able to enjoy the fruits of a stadium or a weight room, but I will be able to enjoy seeing these kids chase their dreams, seeing them going about doing it the same way that I did. I think there's just a certain honor in that I really appreciate. And it really makes you feel like this is a full circle involvement, a lifetime involvement of Jayhawk football, seeing guys that, one day you'll be looking back and it'll be 2 generations, and that's coming for us soon. So I'm excited to see all the ways in which this program continues to grow under Coach Leipold. And man, thank you so much for joining me. Kerry is honestly one of the best humans I've ever been around. Just a class dude, man, and he's being very modest about his athleticism. Okay, this guy was like Trevor Lawrence or something, man. He had the long yellow, the long blonde locks, running in traps all elite. I mean, this guy was 100% that dude. So don't never let him tell you any different. Kerry, thanks so much for joining me, man. We'll get you back on sometime at point this season.
All right, appreciate you being back. Take care.
All right,
Good luck.
rock.
Yep, always.